What is cracking this week, Drew Banger?
Yo, yo. How's it going? Are you all right?
I'm good. I'm great. I got to do some jits over the week, so I felt like I was in
Oh,
a different
awesome.
headspace.
Awesome. Tell me about it. What happened?
Oh, so like a buddy of mine, he's got some mat space, and I just went over to his place and then just basically rolled. We were just like, "You got anything you want to do?" It's like, "Nah, we just need to get back into it.
Get
Just need
going.
to just get going and just see what happens." And so yeah, we just rolled for about an hour and a bit, and yeah, it was so much fun. It was just like
How
the
did you
kind
structure
of
it? Did you do like 3 minute rounds or 10-minute rounds? What did you do?
yeah, we did 6 minute rounds. We started off light, like just like get flowy. So
Yeah.
I'd set the timer already. It's like 6 minutes on, 1 minute off, 6 minutes on, 1 minute
Okay.
off. But
Oof.
because it was easy rolling, we just went 3 rounds straight. So we did about 20 minutes of just continuous
Go, go, flow.
see where we end up
Nice.
and be like, oh, like this is interesting. What's going on here? And and then yeah, but then afterwards, like, okay, let's just go a bit harder. I said to him, I was like, I want you to fucking come at me, just go for it,
Come at me.
because that's it exactly. Because it gets to a point where yeah, you're just taking it a bit too easy, so you're not
Yeah.
you're not responding well enough. You just lie back and you just go, well, you just stand there and you just go, wait, okay, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
this. But then when you start to have that mindset of, oh no, something serious could happen here, and you respond a little bit better, and
Switch on.
you're realizing, yeah, you switch on, you're realizing what you actually know to respond to the situation.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, we back.
I don't know.
I think I think I lost you
That was
there for a
really weird.
second.
I know, sorry. You
Yeah,
froze up.
yeah,
I
all
don't know if you
good, all
paused
good.
it. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like for a moment, I was like, "Oh crap, everything's lost." Sorry, we're
I know.
back. But yeah, so then we just started going at it, and a little bit more, just like up the intensity somewhat, and that was great because
Good.
yeah, you just get to see where your mistakes are. You become a little bit more creative as
Yeah.
well. You respond to the situation a little bit better. It's just like this. It's basically trial and error. Is like if you caught me a couple times, like if you got my head a couple times. I mean, I'm always like this. I'm like, oh, tall posture G. Just neck hanging out. Everybody just wants to grab it. So he grabbed it a couple times. So I just had
Sure.
to just protect
Change
it a little
it.
bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it brought that back to my consciousness. Oh, okay, I make a mistake here. I need to do that. And then there were a couple of times when I'm trying to do something, is like trying to get him into a single leg X guard, and I just kept screwing it up, and then I realized what I was. Then we just quit. Like it happened 2, 3 times, so then we just broke it down. It was like, okay, what's actually happening here? And he
Mm.
goes, and I just realized I wasn't doing one particular thing, and so changed that, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm back in. I'm doing that better as well. So it was like the idea of like mistakes highlight to your brain what needs to change, because if you don't make those, if you don't pay attention to those mistakes, then you're missing an opportunity for improvement, right?
Mm.
So instead of it just being like I've made a mistake, it's because I'm shit at it yet, and I'll just get there eventually. It's like no,
Yeah.
let me just pay attention to this mistake for a second and realize what I'm actually doing. And it wasn't that I didn't know; it was that I was just not applying something that I knew, and I just
Right.
forgot that step basically. And oh yeah, okay, go back into it, do it again. It's like, okay, now I'm making life a lot more difficult for him. And then,
Mm.
yeah, so just doing that kind of thing, that was so much fun, because there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of novelty going on. There was, physical exertion, movement in lots of different ways, tumbling around, you're finding yourself like upside down, inverted.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's so cool. And it's like play. It's like play, This is basically
Love
what it
it.
was like. So when we finished, I just kind of looked up. I was like, oh man, I feel so good. I mean, I feel like
Awesome.
I'm like out of breath, I'm all that kind of stuff, but I feel really good because I've just used my mind and brain in a completely different way.
Right.
So that was, yeah, it was super cool. I was super stoked to be able to do that. And I think, yeah, there's a lot in it as well in terms of like, I always just think of JITS as like it's a great training ground for life lessons as well.
I
It's like,
agree.
I made a mistake, he punishes me for it. And he's like, okay, what did I do wrong here? And then it highlights it. It's a process of trial and error and getting better and better and better.
Very
An
much
iterative
so.
process. Yeah, iterative process of getting better and better and better. And that's just so applicable to just life, basically. You just got to extrapolate lessons you learn there and put it into life, because it's easy to get frustrated when you're just constantly making those mistakes, but then you address it and you just go, oh yeah, this is why it's going on. Then you're just a little bit better, and then you're a little bit better, and then the next level of mistake comes along. So it's cool because you're just making better levels of mistakes.
Leveling up, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Level up, make a mistake there, level up, make a mistake there, level up, make a mistake there, and just higher quality of mistakes, basically. So that's make really higher quality of mistakes, and and it was just fun to do that, and just want to get back into things. And it's just great. It highlights. It was like I highlighted what I'd kind of forgotten a little bit, highlighted the things that I want to work on, and highlight where I'm maybe good at finishing stuff and not so good at finishing it. So that was cool. It's just a lot of fun. Just super happy with that.
With rolling with a mate, do you find it different to? Obviously, it's different to rolling with a stranger, but what were the differences for you? I mean, obviously, you know your mate really, really well. Are you at the same level, or has he got more experience? I can't remember. What was it like in terms of rolling with a mate as opposed to rolling with someone that you don't know that well? Do you know what I mean? The differences.
Yeah, that's a good question, because so with this friend, we're at the same level.
Okay.
He's got different skills than I have because he's smaller than me as well. So he's a lot about movement and making sure he doesn't get crushed, basically. So he's very good at
I feel that.
Yeah, exactly. So he's very good at finding spaces and just utilizing that space, because he just wants to make sure he just doesn't get flattened. So sure. So there's that, and I think with him, because he's smaller than me, the main concern that I have is I just don't want to feel like a dick by either using strength or using size. And so I feel like I kind of hold myself back because I don't want it to feel like I'm...
What's the weight difference between you?
I think I'd say right now the weight difference is 16 kilos. So I think, or 14, 15 kilos. Like I'm 78 right now and he's 64 or 63. Okay. So something like that. So it's a couple of stone basically, and so it's a big enough difference for it to for you to actually feel it. And so the main thing is just basically don't feel like I'm just being a dick. But at the same time, the flip side of that equation is he's also, because of that, he's got to learn to be able to deal with that, right? Yeah. But this is where there's a lot of little things that come into it, which is, but main thing is I just don't want to feel like I'm being a dick to my training partner. If we both decide to go hard, it's like, okay, cool, we both decided that. It's not because I've gone hard and he's gone, oh, he's gonna be like that, is he? And then he goes hard. So it's like, there's a decision there. And there's certain people where I find it very difficult to roll with, like for example, my brother. I find it difficult because it's like we've just always had a really what's the word? Just a total, it's a respectful relationship where we've never really got into any arguments and never really got into any fights or stuff like that. It's just because we're just sensible to each other like that. It was just if there's an issue, it just never really was, because we're just really good at communicating with each other generally. So so then when he started training as well, then it was like, oh, I'm gonna get physical with my bro and try and fuck him up. Like, this feels really, really weird. So I find that strange. So the strangest thing for me is actually rolling with my bro. Like, I just can't. Not that I can't. It's like I've realized, it's like, okay, well, I'm not being a dick just by being physical with my bro like that. This is a game that we're playing.
Different way, isn't it? It's suddenly a different, it takes your relationship into a different space, and it's one that you've not, even though you've known each other for X amount of years, obviously, you've suddenly got to navigate a different way of working with each other, or a different way of communicating in a way, and that's very bizarre. It's like when I started training with you and suddenly we had to roll together. That was very weird because I'd only known you in a kind of academic situation, so to suddenly have to go and like actually get physical and navigate around, it was weird. So I get that. I understand that.
I remember saying to you a couple of times, like, Jude, come at me, just go. You're like, I want you to fucking come at me. It's like Fight Club. It's like, I want you to hit me as hard as you can. And
I was like, no, but then I did.
Yeah, exactly. Then you started coming at me. I was like, yes, this is what it's about. This is what it's about. So yeah, that's the cool thing. And you're right. It's like you're just entering a new space with somebody that you know in a certain way. Yes. But when it comes, because he's my bro. You know, I've just known it. He's the person I've known for the most amount of time my whole life. And yeah, exactly. It's the most personal. So there's that aspect of if I do something and like, you know, say I get him into a guillotine or something and I just lock his head in a certain way and I just cause him some discomfort and I didn't do it right, I'd feel like such a prick. Like I'd be like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. And I mean, that applies to anyone, but it's specifically there. So sometimes I find myself like with certain people, I just don't necessarily go for it as much. But this is also what I use jiu-jitsu for as well, is actually being like, hey, you can impose yourself without it actually being something which is a bad thing. You know, you have to learn how to assert yourself. Otherwise, you just end up getting walked all over. And part of that I've found is, you know, every time I'm passive because I feel like I don't want to be assertive and imposing, I get my ass handed to me. You know, it's like, it's not a great feeling. Whereas if I'm being assertive and I'm being proactive, even if I get my ass handed to me, I've done it in a way which I can agree with, right? It's so much better because I've actually tried and failed rather than just let the failure come on to me. And that's so much more satisfying and gratifying than just not really doing anything about it. So it's teaching me a lot, like in that sense. And I just feel like a better person. And when I'm able to express myself in that way as well, and I'm like, oh yeah, this feels good. I should carry that over into other things in my life and just learn. That's why it's really skill. That's why it's really important. So yeah, you're right. There is like, you know, I have approached it differently with different people. There's certain there's levels to the game, clearly, because there's like there's people, because if it's like, I'm just trying to think of it with, you know, going against like say Sylvie, wrestling coach, like all around like just class grappler, there's just nothing I can do to like threaten him in a sense, so it doesn't almost matter something to your mentality,
doesn't it? It does something because you're like you know, you just can't.
So there used to be a time this is interesting. So there used to be a time when I would, like with my old coach, it's like, you know, okay, I want you to roll me. I'll be like, oh great, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do here. It's like anything I try, he's seeing it come from a mile away anyway, so what's the point? But then and I would just, I would literally do nothing. It would just be like, oh, okay, well, if I try this, he knows this is going to happen. If I try this, it's like, that's not the point. And then after a while, I started realizing that's just not helping me at all, because the idea of like the point of rolling with him is for him to see what level I've got to and what I need to do next.
But also for you to learn as well, so that you can go against other people, right?
But that's it, So it's like, you know, exactly. So you're just going to help me to figure out, is like, okay, you did this well, you didn't do that so well, etc., etc., etc. So, but instead I was stuck in this like mindset of just shrink yourself instead of extend yourself and build yourself up. And but now is like, okay, well, I should just go for all these different things and just see what happens, because if I get shut down, then I'm going to learn what the weakest part is, and he's going to be able to say to me, yeah, you did this well, you didn't do that so well. This is where you kept faltering. You made this mistake several times. I need to talk to you about that. And and it's a great learning curve, for me, because it's like I'm going against somebody who's better than me, who, if I'd managed to pull just the slightest thing off on, that means I know that thing, right? It's like, that means I'm getting better at that thing. And and yes, and then be like, okay, cool, that tells me, it gives me a lot better indication of where I'm actually at, right? So it's like when you're actually going against somebody who's better than you, you're figuring out where you are actually at. And I think that's, again, that's another thing to extrapolate out into like life in general, is surrounding yourself with people who are better than you at certain things.
Yeah.
And so that you really know where you level up on that kind of thing. And what's really cool is like, yeah, it's like, what's really cool is, you know, if, with you, for example, is like essentially you're dealing with a lot of women, especially postnatal, coming out with back pain, and then also having these conversations with you, but then also figuring out from some clients, I was like, there's a real blind spot for me here, like in terms of female health. Like we both know now that there's, you know, the research that ever gets done is mostly done on men because of the unpredictability of the female physiology, and so they
Throughout
can't really
their
control for that, and throughout their
Yeah.
lifespan. So if they're trying to figure something out, people tend not to use women as the example. So so there's like, in general, there's a bit of a blind spot there. So me realizing is like, okay, there's stuff here that I don't necessarily know as well. So I want to listen to you, you know, I want to hear what's going on there. And then like my housemates, like one's a PhD student and another one like works in IT, and they think very differently. And that's really, it's just really interesting to be around it, like really differently. It's like, and that's what's great as well. Like we know that we can get along, right? It's like we think completely differently, but they're like, you know, there's some of the best people that I know. So I'm talking to them and I'm getting a completely different perspective, and not necessarily one that I agree with, but it's really, really cool to sit there and explore those differences.
Teaching you how to work through that as well, though, isn't it? Because if you don't agree, it's teaching you and helping you learn how to face disagreement constructively as well.
Exactly.
Because you live with these people, so you have to be able to be constructive to get through something that you disagree with, because you're not going to be all like, oh, well, that's it, and you know, we're not mates anymore or whatever. You have to find a way through, and I think that's really important in life. And again, if we bring it back to jits, it's like that's what you're trying to do when you're rolling with someone. You're trying to find a way through and find your own way within this disagreement. So yeah,
exactly. And like, and that's what's really cool is seeing how just seeing how my mind set is shifting from that kind of thing, because it's very much like I know, you know, you talk about being agreeable. I am definitely more of an agreeable person as well. So when something comes my way, whereas like I don't necessarily agree with it, I just the default is to not really necessarily challenge the other person or not explore that, or because of like mostly from a position of feeling like I don't want to, like, it goes back to imposing and assertiveness. It's like I don't want to impose, you know, I don't want to assert anything and make that person feel uncomfortable. But the truth is, there's so much more to be gained from having that conversation and actually having a bit of pushback than any other way. And because you know, you just delve into something which is a lot deeper, you know, uncover some things which are really, really useful for yourself. So the amount of times, like, you know, gone into a conversation, somebody has a different perspective that helps me inform mine is just incredible. And then like you know, I give you a good example of it is it's something a bit more, it's like nothing like life-changing or anything like that, but it's like, you know, me and my housemate watched a movie together, Magnolia. I don't know if you know about it. You've seen it?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, but
I remember.
for me, yeah, I think it's a sick film, and but he was like, oh no, this is shit, right? So, but the interesting thing is, like, we like a lot of the same films as well. So it's like, okay, what was it about that you don't like? What is it about it? And it made me think about genuinely like, why is it that I like this movie as well? So and some of the reasons that I liked it was actually the reason that he doesn't like it. And this is complete, and it's like and I was just like, oh, this is really interesting. And I was also thinking, there's plenty of people who would be offended by that. Like, you know, it's like you are being challenged, or you're being like, people can construe it as you're being told that the way you view something is shit, is just
or your
is
preference is shit, right?
yeah, exactly. Because if it's like the reasons that I like this movie are the exact reasons that this person who I have a lot of respect for, and like, you know, was a great friend of mine, and we like a lot of the same things, but there's certain things that are just like, this is not, it's not the same. It can make you feel defensive. It can make you feel like, oh, maybe I've done something, and maybe I've got a wrong viewpoint here, or maybe I'm not understanding something very well. So you can start to get a little bit defensive, and you can feel even offended by that opinion. But really, all it highlighted was, you know, we just see things a bit differently. You know, our background, the way that we've grown up, and the ideas that we've formulated and stuff like that just shape the way we view things differently. So what's interesting then is like, we're never questioning why we like the same movies. So then it made us think, actually, we probably like the same movies, but for very different reasons now as well, right? So there'll be a lot of overlap for sure, but there'll also be some reasons that we never really thought about. So which was really cool. So just like, you know, I was sitting there, I was listening to him, and I was like, no, I don't agree with that at all, but that's really interesting that you would think that. And yeah, and just kind of like left it at that. I was like, cool. It's wicked. It's like, all right, you know, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it, but I really like this movie. And it's and it's like, when you don't enjoy it and it's a 3-hour long movie, you're like, oh, I've never got that time back. And
but I think that's okay, because you still experienced it. You still experienced something, and something that came up as you were talking. It's like, yeah, your housemate and you might not have found it the same, but actually it could all be down to headspace and where you are at that moment in time, and how you're feeling, and your emotions, and what's been going on in the background, and everything. It's like, he might have felt agitated, was just not quite in the right headspace, and you were in a good headspace to watch that particular film. So that's the reality as well. It's like, your realities are really different sometimes. You're different people experiencing the same thing from a different perspective. So that can often have an effect. Sometimes I'm so agitated that I can't watch a film. And sometimes I'm in exactly the right space to watch exactly the film that I'm watching. And I think that's the reality. That's your reality. So maybe that's the way as well. Yeah, because I think I like many of the films that you like, but I'm sure there's some of them that I don't like. But again, it's all to do with experience. And you said something to me about one of the films that you told me to watch with Amy Adams. What was that? Yeah, that was it. And you were like, you'll relate to that more because you're a mother, whereas I relate to that Tom Cruise film more because of Tom Cruise. Do you know what I mean? It was like, so our experiences when we're watching something are going to be different, because I will look at it from, I guess, a mother's point of view. So that spoke to me more than, I can't remember the name of the film. What was the Tom Cruise film?
Oblivion.
Yes, that was it. And even though I loved it, it's like Arrival spoke to me more because of, I guess, our different situations. So there's all of that that comes into it when you're watching things like that. But going back to being agreeable, I am very agreeable. But I'm also learning that it's okay not to be, and to almost listen to my body when something doesn't sit right with me, you know, when I don't agree with something. And I think it's about how you come at it as well. I think if you're like, no, I don't agree with that, fuck you, I'm right, you're wrong, then and I am going to shrink. If someone does that to me, I'm massively going to shrink and go, okay, that's fine. Whereas if the other person's going to explore it with me and sit and we'll go, okay, well, let's figure this out. Why don't we agree? And let's come at this, you know, with curiosity and thoughtfulness and respect for each other. Then I think that's very different. And if you are exploring something that you don't agree with someone that you trust, then that's okay. That's when it is. And that's when I won't shrink. And that's when I'm like, okay, all right, it's okay to have a differing opinion to someone, and let's figure out why. And then, okay, we still might not agree on something, but we've seen each other's differing opinions. And I think that's important as well, because again, it comes back to different realities, different upbringings, different environments, different backgrounds, different experiences. And that's going to shape whether you agree with whatever you're talking about or not. So, I think it's about respect and just exploration as well, and having those agreements or disagreements with people that you feel comfortable doing that with as well.
Yeah, it's that's a good place to start. But also, if somebody comes at you with "now you're full of shit," it's kind of you have to be able to hold your ground a little bit as well. It's like
that's what I'm not good at.
Yeah, that's the thing. So yeah, now I'm gonna deliberately do this with you now. It's like you're gonna say something to me. I'm like, "Dude, that was bullshit. What are you talking about?" And I'm just gonna see where you go with it. And I'll be like, "No, you shrunk. Don't shrink. Stand up. Stand up for yourself." Just gonna randomly just do this.
You do it all the time on text, though.
Yeah. Yeah, you're learning to, over text at least, you're learning to push back against me. So that's good. That's good.
We've got something.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I know what he's doing here, that bastard.
So I'm just like, fuck off, back.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when it's like a little bit more of a vulnerable moment. You said thank you to me for something the other day.
That's it, for the podcast,
Yeah. I was like, you were like, thank you. And I just went, fuck off.
And you're like, oh, there. And I was like, oh, fuck off.
Again, that was another deliberate one of just like, come on, give me something back, dude. I want something back out of you. Yeah, that was funny.
Your message, it was funny. I was just like, oh, Gorinda.
Yeah, I was like, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate the sentiment and the gratitude. You know that as well. I did say that afterwards.
I know. But you had to caveat it though afterwards. You were like, I can't just leave this fuck off, Jude, can I? So you're like, no, thank you, spam first.
Yeah, it's only afterwards. It was only afterwards. It was only afterwards. It's like you got the message, and then I sent you that afterwards. But it's like it's kind of like building your own confidence up, or rather, it's just kind of you have to have your own confidence with it, right? But it's also this is where I love like being also, is like just realizing that nothing is black and white. There's the nuance to it as well, because you can't be hubrised by your own confidence. It's like if somebody does challenge you, even if it is in a bit of a dickish way, it's like even if it is done in a very forceful way, is like okay, instant reaction, get defensive, and it's just like, wait, why has that just happened? And if you want to engage, great. If you don't, it's like, just leave it at that. It just doesn't matter. But just knowing that, and if it, knowing that, just because somebody approaches it that way doesn't mean that you are necessarily wrong, right? So there's, but then also, there's like the kind of nuance to it as well. Like, we've said it before, is like perspective is just a slither of reality, and it's often distorted because it's just, whatever we choose to believe at that phase of our life. So there is an element of actually, no, we do need to go digging for the actual truth here as well, because it can't just be relative to what a person believes. So if they're attacking something which is not grounded in any kind of like truth, or as like trying to be as objective as possible, then they're probably wrong. Like, then there's something that you just can't get, you can't get to the bottom of. So you have to, there are times where obviously like clearly somebody's going to be wrong, but it's just like, on what level is it? Like which level are you playing this game at? Like when does it matter that if somebody is actually right or wrong in this instance? And, but that's the nature of reality as well. Is like, we're never gonna really know. But as long as, whatever viewpoint you have, I guess, on a grand scale of things is not screwing somebody over, then
it's all good,
hopefully we're all good.
I was also going to say that not everyone is going to like you, regardless of what you think, feel, talk about. What else to say? Not everyone's going to agree with you, right? But as long as you're being authentic and you're being the best version of yourself, and I don't know, but just on being agreeable, it's just I think it's just about being as authentic as you can be and not trying to be likable, right? So this is what we're talking about. This is where being agreeable is. It's essentially you're trying to get people not to like you, but being agreeable is about not ruffling any feathers, not wanting to make an impact or anything, but actually being yourself and being your authentic self. Some people aren't going to like you. Some people are going to not agree with you. You know, I often think about this when I post stuff up on social media. It's like, sometimes I'm like, oh, people are going to think I'm an idiot. And then it's like, well, what do you think? As in me, what do I think? Am I happy with what I'm posting? Because if I'm happy, it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? And that might sound arrogant. It might sound narcissistic, but it's like, but is it? Because if I'm being authentic and I'm coming from a place of being genuine, then someone might not like it. Someone might think I'm an idiot. Someone like, oh, there she is again, posting pictures of herself. But it's like, but that's how I'm trying to get my message across. So I think it's something that we spoke about with Emily as well. It's just like, we're trying to get a message across, and sometimes using an image that we might not want to use brings that message across. No. Just, what do you think? It's like, it was just a thought that if you're happy with what you're writing and what you're saying and what you're talking about, then yeah, some people aren't going to like it, but not everyone is, and that's the way it is, right?
Yeah, can't be shooting for the likes, right?
Nah.
Can't be shooting for the impact. Yeah, it's how do you deal with that in life in general? Because it's like the idea of not being liked. So if that does actually happen,
I find it difficult. But at the same time, again, it comes back to reality, doesn't it? It comes back to everything that we've just discussed. That in someone's reality, they might not like me for X, Y, and Z. But if I'm being my true, authentic self, then I can't be anything else. I can't be what everyone, expects me to be or likes of me, because that's not the way it works. It's like, yeah, I find it hard if people don't like me, but at the same time, it's like that. What other people think of me is not my problem. It's like, it's what do I think of me? Am I happy with how I present myself to the world? And if I am, that's all I can do. You can't please everyone, and nor should you, right? So it's about how I feel and how I choose to live my life, and is it authentic to me, I think.
Yeah. Do you have any memory of the last time it might happen to you and like how you dealt with it?
What, where someone didn't like me?
Yeah.
Not that I could share, but
yeah, they're dead now. She killed him. Yeah, don't cross Jude.
Put them up.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to think. It's like I don't know if people don't like me. People don't always state it, do they?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you ever found out. Like, I don't really remember. But
I can't imagine anyone not liking you. But go on, tell me. Have you ever had that interest or that point? Not interest, but has anyone said to you they don't like you?
Why does that make you laugh that much? You just think it's that outlandish that somebody would like you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I like him. No, I just can't imagine it.
That's hilarious. I guess in a way, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I'll say it's like I can't really imagine somebody not liking me as well. Not like, again, not in this arrogant, narcissistic kind of way. This is just purely like, you know what I mean? It's just purely like, because I've just not really had it, so I don't know what it would be like. So if it ever happened and somebody was just like, he's just a total dick, there's just something about him I just don't like, I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, I can't. It's like, I'm really curious to know what you think it is. Actually, I'll be like, please tell me. Because
I'd want to know.
Yeah, I'd want to know. It's like, obviously that's a difficult thing to take on if somebody like hits on something and you're like, oh, that's probably kind of true. Oh shit, oh yeah, okay, I've got to deal with that now.
Then you've got to sit with that, haven't you?
Yeah,
and decide
exactly.
like what you're going to do, and go, oh shit. I mean, it's ego, isn't it? And it's like when someone disrupts that and ruffles your feathers, it's like, urgh. And it's like, I'm not great at criticism, but I'm getting better at taking criticism. When I was a musician and someone criticised me, God help them. But now it's like, bring it. give me the criticism. I don't just want like, oh, lovely, lovely. I want to know what I can do better. You know, I think it's so important to grow. But no, I can't imagine anyone disliking you, to be fair, unless they're just like that fucking Gorinda. Honestly, he's just too good, isn't he?
Go on, yeah, keep saying it, Jude. Whatever's just, you're on a roll here. Keep saying those good things. Yeah, go on.
It's like, I'm done now. It's finished.
Oh, is that it? That's all you had? All right, great. I'll just, I'll have to go massage my own ego later on then.
Yes, do that. No, but it's true. It's just, I don't know. It's like, okay, maybe in our world, maybe there would be a bit of, I don't know, jealousy. Maybe there'd be a bit of that. I don't know, a bit of envy there. People see, maybe for both of us, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a bit of envy. That would be the only thing that I could think.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. On that note. Yeah. Right. Sorry. I just didn't know in relation to who you're talking about.
No, sorry, I wasn't very clear. But that's the only reason that people are like, I don't like him or her because, you know, they're doing all this. It was that maybe there's just envy there and thing. Right.
Yeah. Cool. You know, it's interesting. It just makes me think of another thing, like, which I would find difficult to deal with. And it comes from, like, you know, growing up as like with a bit more. It's like I still battle with it every day. It's just like a full-on fixed mindset of just. It's interesting because it's like, you know, you can look at me and be like, oh, he's Mr. Growth Mindset. It's like, yeah, because I try and practice it all the time. It's like I have. Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm trying to change that relationship that I have with myself. You know, it's like that sounds, or what's the word? It's like, I can't remember what the word is, where you're just referring to that self-referential, but it's but it's true. It is like, yeah, that relationship with, because you know, you're not just one being. You're just there's lots of different aspects of you that are feeding into the core of you, right? So
you're changing all the time.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, changing the relationship that I have with those any different part of myself, and so yeah, so one of the things has always been like. Kind of like you're not sounding stupid, or rather, I don't mind not knowing something, but I don't want to. Yeah, it's the idea of asking a stupid question, and so there's yeah. So it's like I mean, that's pretty common as well, in the sense that like a lot of people don't put their hand up, and when they're not sure of something, it just no, it's not quite asking a stupid question. It's more like I don't want to ask a. I think this goes just in terms of exploration. I don't want to ask a question which has an obvious answer, in that sense.
Why?
I think it's well. I don't like budget questions. Basically, it's like I call it a budget.
Is that what you mean?
I call it a budget question. Yeah, it's like, no, like if I'm trying to find something out, I don't want just a yes or no. I don't want a question which is just a yes or no. Like, I'm not going to be like, is it because of this? And you can say yes or no. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I like to form more inquisitive questions. And so I feel like if I'm not doing that, I'm like, oh, that's just a bit stupid. That wasn't asking for.
What did you say to me at the beginning of the podcast? What did you say to me just before?
Just before what?
The podcast. What did you just tell me? There are no stupid questions, right?
Did I?
Yes, you did. You like that?
Oh, just
damn it!
Yeah, exactly. No. I think there's no stupid question. I think it's just a case of just formulating an inquisitive question, basically. I think there's quality of questions, right? Is what I'm getting at. So I'm always trying to ask a better question. And I think that's it's a tough thing to do. Like most things, it's a skill. Yeah, it's
huge.
So I think, I don't know, maybe that's somewhere where sometimes
it comes down to communication, though, doesn't it?
But it has been in the past. It was something where I would just like not do anything with, but you know, if I needed to, and I just wouldn't really, I would just like, you know, sit back a little bit more. But now, because I'm a lot more aware of it, I just try and put myself in that situation where I feel like I must ask that question, and I must speak up and I must say something. Otherwise, there's an opportunity lost here.
That's
And
more about confidence as well, though, isn't it? It's like when you have more confidence in what you want to ask, and that you know that it's a well-rounded and useful question. And that comes from learning more about yourself and learning about the subject that you are studying and asking a question to the expert that you've come to study with. I think that's definitely down to confidence and confidence in what you're asking and confidence in yourself as well.
yeah.
Me, I like to just kind of sit there and absorb it, and then I'll ask the questions. But yeah, I think it's different learning styles as well.
Yeah. Well, it's less to do with learning styles. I think it's more to do with where I sit, like with myself. I kind of feel like, so let's say, we're going to have some pretty exciting guests coming on to the podcast,
Yes.
right? Through the month of June.
Yep.
And all will be revealed, people. All will be revealed.
Soon.
Exactly. So like for me personally, it's kind of like, I could go in completely blind into these conversations and not know anything about them and inquire, and that can generally that is probably fine. But then also for me, I'm like, well, whatever I can find out about this person, or the line of work or something like that, the higher level conversation that we can have, and I feel like people will get more out of it too, and I feel like I would get more out of it too.
Yes.
So there's that side of it where it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to ask a better quality question. That's basically what it is. I want to have thought about it a little bit more, and there's exponentially more to be gained by having one question, which is a much better question than what I would have gone in with if I didn't know anything about this person or their body of work or anything at all. So that's where I kind of sit with it. It goes back to when we talked about that question of, if you have to ask yourself, will this do? The answer is invariably it won't. And so with me, it's kind of like, okay, well, if I don't do this stuff, I know I'm going to feel like I've missed an opportunity here. So I feel like I have to get myself up to a certain level to be able to get a hell of a lot more out of something. And but then within that, if there's something which I completely have no idea about, is like, okay, I've got nothing here. Can you help me understand where you're coming from with that? So yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's like, it's not straightforward. It's not necessarily like, it's not, this is exactly the way things are. There's nuance to it, but essentially it's like, for me, I feel like I'm personally asking myself, if I go into something where I just don't have that much background in it, or at least I haven't done a little bit of research to understand what it's about, then I feel like I'm wasting an opportunity.
I also think you feel like you're underprepared, and then for me, it would go back to preparation is everything. Like when I used to be a musician, being the most prepared I can be. Yes, it's different when you're interviewing someone, but if I went in blind and I didn't know anything about them, and I hadn't done any study, I hadn't done any research, I didn't know anything about them, I would feel hugely underprepared, and it's almost like I hadn't practiced. And the questions wouldn't be as insightful. You come at it from a performance point of view. It's got to be a good performance. This person who's coming on our show, or whatever it might be, or you're asking a question within a lecture or whatever. It's like asking a useful question. It's important for you, isn't it? And it means that you've come at it from, you've learned it, you've practiced some stuff, you haven't just come in blind. And I think that's what you're talking about. Sometimes people might ask questions where it's like, you haven't really done the study, or you're not really quite at that level. Whereas if you're coming in from an informed place, and from a place where you've practiced and understood, and you have a baseline of knowledge about that person, that subject, whatever, then that question is going to be more informed. Like, I couldn't think of anything worse than interviewing the people that we're about to interview and not having done the work behind them. I think that would terrify me, and I'd just sit there like that. So I will read as much as possible before.
You're just going to shut your camera off.
Like that for the whole 2 hours. Jude, you got anything to say? No.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's just coming from a place of being informed and also just having done the work. And that's when the questions will be really interesting, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as you were speaking as well, it got me thinking about, the need for being like even a little bit versed in the thing that you want to discuss, because there's an aspect of it. This comes back to better quality questions, basically, is the idea that you don't have to know anything about a particular thing, but if you have a certain way of thinking which allows you to ask inquisitive, explorative questions, then that is way more valuable than having done the prerequisite research potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
something that I'm kind of like.
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Well, yeah, for me is like I still wouldn't feel complete if I didn't do the work.
Yeah.
Prehand and beforehand, but then also at the same time is like the skill of asking better questions will help me cover a lot of what I don't know, because I'll be able to get a lot more out of the interaction or whatever it is I'm trying to do. It's just basically asking better questions.
Asking questions is a skill as well.
Yeah,
it
could just basically mean I don't have to know anything about you or what you do. Got no grounding in it whatsoever, but because I know how to ask a question which you're happy to answer, and feel like it's beneficial, then we're going somewhere. Because there's a couple of instances I can think of where it hasn't gone well for the interviewer, and the interviewee was like, "What the hell? Like,
oh, really?
What's going on here?"
In other podcasts or in just interviews in general?
Well, this is at another level of like Larry King interviewing Jerry Seinfeld like years ago, after Seinfeld got cancelled, after Seinfeld was finished, and Larry King asked him, he asked him about the show getting cancelled, and Jerry Seinfeld was like, what? How do you not know this? Because the last episode was watched by like 90 million people in America. Wow. It was a crazy popular show. Everybody knows the story of the show, especially if you're in the media. You're going to know like how it ended and everything like that, and like the story, like why it ended and stuff like that. So because he was getting that question, he was like, "What? How the hell do you not know this?" Yeah. And like, it's kind of legit. It's like, who's doing your research? Why haven't you found this out? Because that's pretty easy information. And then there was another instance in a different way where the conversation, I felt like you could have got a lot more out of it. Maybe it was also colored by how what I was expecting from the conversation. It was just when Kelly Starrett some years ago ended up on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it was just after he'd released Becoming a Supple Leopard, not soon after that. And it's just basically his guide for people taking care of their own bodies. Okay. And I was pretty excited about it because he was somebody who really started opening my eyes up to the world of body maintenance and how to do that, and so I credit him for a lot of like my whatever came after that for me. And so when he's going on the show, I was like, oh, this is gonna be great, because Rogan's into this kind of stuff. He's super into looking after your body. He probably would have read a little bit about his book, and then he'd be able to talk to him about this kind of stuff. But for the longest time, they just weren't on the same level, and it turned out like I would have thought Rogan would have read his book, especially because it's the kind of thing he's into, and he hadn't, and they just couldn't see eye to eye during the conversation. He was trying to explain some stuff to him about why it's important for fighters to do to be a certain way, like, or at least look after their bodies in a certain way, and Rogan was just like not kind of understanding, because he's like, well, I am a fighter and I've been in the game for a long time, and as in I understand fighting, and so why is this beneficial? And it was like, I think you'd know that if you'd read what his book was saying, and then you could have a better level of conversation rather than being stuck for 40 minutes on whether something is useful or not for a fighter. And so maybe on one level, like, so that's probably colored by my expectation of what the kind of conversation they could have had, and instead it was just like they just didn't. it just didn't look like they saw eye to eye. And but on the flip side is like, well, this is what would happen if somebody wasn't familiar with the subject topic, and you're trying to figure it out as you go along. But then for me, I was like, this is getting stuck in a place where it doesn't need to get stuck.
Right.
So I kind of think of those examples of like, not asking a good question on one side, and then on the other side is like that level of preparation which could have excelled the side, the kind of the
So this is
conversation you
balance,
could be
isn't
having.
it?
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, actually, it's like you've obviously done the podcast for well over a year now, and you've had several guests on. Do you feel like the way you interview and the way you've asked questions has changed? I was your first guest as well. So do you feel like it's changed because of, it's a learning experience. Every time you have someone on, every time you're asking questions, every time you have someone on that you might not know or you might not know much about, it's like, do you feel like the way you ask questions has changed and developed and grown since you've been doing the podcast? The way you communicate, even?
Yeah, this is good because I haven't explicitly thought about it, but what has happened is, like, first of all, the key thing for me is just to be curious and have that conversation with someone with curiosity. And so what has happened is, I think questions wise, what'll happen is, like, the thing that I can think of is I will just write down an idea of something that I want to talk about with the person, and like just the first version of that thought is just that's it. Like for example, the first time you were on, the thing I can remember thinking and asking you was about, like, your musical brain essentially is like, how you see things. So I was just like, that's it. It's like, how does Jude see things? And that's all it was. And then from that, it was like, no, like, what do I actually mean from that? So then it would just be, it's just like writing down the initial thought and then writing down what I actually want to get out of it, and then asking the question which will allow you to answer the actual question, rather than it being it going off in a different way. So, and then and the same thing with, like, the latest one was with Emily and, like, body image. I just literally wrote down, like, keywords, a bunch of things that I had in my head, and then realize, okay, this stands out a bit more. I'm going to formulate a question around that. And then I'd write the question out, and I go, that's not good enough. It's like, and then let me ask it in a way which will hopefully tease out more of an answer. So I think it's just been that process of. That's what I've realized I need to do, is just, like, first of all, just have a bit of a process around it, and it's still getting better.
Of course,
for sure.
it'll be different in a year, I'll tell you that now. And has it helped you in life, doing this, asking questions within the podcast, communicating, asking questions to someone that you might not know? Has it helped you, say, with your work, with your, I don't know, your everyday, with your friendship, etc.? Has it helped in every day?
Yeah, 100%. Totally. It's
just,
I mean, the ways that it's helped, the biggest one is just be able to express what you're thinking, even if you don't know where you're going with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool, because what's really cool about that is you don't really know. Like, one of the things, I don't really know if I believe the thing I'm about to say, and it's okay to be that way, right?
Being curious.
Yeah, that's it. It's just like, it's just being curious. It's like, just because I say some words, it doesn't define who I am, right? It's like, I can say something outlandish, it doesn't mean I believe it. It's the idea, I can't remember whoever said it or exactly how the line goes, but it's essentially, is like the mark of a wise man is being able to entertain a thought without becoming the thought, So I feel like I feel like I've got better at doing that, and because I've realized that if I say something, it doesn't mean that that's who I am, so I don't have to feel self-conscious about having this thought. I think that's a really important thing for people in
That's
general,
huge. Yeah.
is because we have so many thoughts, and the thoughts do have the potential to define you as a human being, depending on how
Yes.
repetitive those thoughts are. So, but if you can definitely, like, entertain a thought, it can be something heinous, it could be something like crazy, but that that doesn't necessarily have to define who I am, and it's then you're in a good spot. Then you realize, like, okay, here's what I like. It could be here's what I do actually think, but having, like, a crazy thought can actually help you figure out where you actually sit with something as well. So I think what's been really cool about that is just basically being able to just say things and not know where you're going to end up with it, and not letting it define you is something that's also difficult to kind of grasp as well, because it's like as soon as it says something, and then it's because it's especially in podcast format, you put it out there, and it's like it's kind of like it's concretized in a way. It's like, oh, you said this in this podcast. It's like, yeah, okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean I stand by 100%, because exactly, you can change your mind, and at the same time is like there's a lot of things, like sometimes I'm saying it and I realize that I don't know how I feel about something. I'm getting this sort of certain kind of feeling in my, like, my chest and my diaphragm area, and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm about to say. I don't really know what I'm saying here, and that's cool, because there's two things there. Is like, one is like getting comfortable with that feeling, but before that is actually becoming aware of that feeling. So I actually know now, if I feel that way, then I'm saying things that I'm not entirely sure about, and then I realize that, oh shit, that's quite often.
But that's okay.
Like, there's a lot of times it's like, because you just sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it can be a bunch of things that I am certain about, but I'm linking them together in a way which I haven't done before, so I'm not sure if it will make sense entirely, and that happens often. So, and that's useful. It's useful to know, to go through, because you're figuring out whether what how those things influence each other, and that's really cool. So, yeah, the idea of just being able to speak and not be completely attached to the words that come out of your mouth. The ability to articulate is a key one. I struggle with that all the time as well, because sometimes I find myself thinking, okay, not thinking. Sometimes I find myself being able to articulate something, and other times, often it's just like, I don't know how I'm going to say this, and so discovering the right vocabulary and the right way to say something, it's been really helpful for that, and that's an important part of communication, right? Is just being able to say things appropriately, in a way that gets your point across. There's so much else, and just so, and being inquisitive as well. So it's allowed me to ask questions in real life as well, not just in this podcast, not just because it's people I'm talking to here, but it's like, it goes back to asking people who know stuff better than I do in certain areas, getting their opinion on stuff. Like, for example, like my bro and my flatmate, they understand cryptocurrencies pretty well. Okay. But from two very different perspectives as well, so which is very cool. Like my flatmate from like the technical side of things, especially, and then my bro from like the economic side of things, especially.
Oh,
so
interesting.
if like they'll talk about it, and I'll realize I got no idea what they're necessarily talking about, because like I'm interested, but I haven't taken that interest and ran with it and done actually something with it. And it's like I have a cursory knowledge of what's going on around it, but then if there's something I really want to know, I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to hear something from two different perspectives. And so basically being able to figure out like what perspectives and what angles people look at things from, that's actually been helpful. And knowing that, the different perspective people have, like where I can categorize them, but also being able to feeling confident asking those questions as well. Is a key thing. Is like not feeling like, oh, I don't know anything, so what's the point in asking? Is like, no, that's definitely why you should ask. Is even if it ends up being, goes back to, if it ends up being a silly question, it doesn't matter, because at least you got a lot more clarity around it. And
Absolutely.
so asking better questions of people around me and stuff that they're familiar with and things I'm not has been super helpful. God, I mean, I could go on about it. There's so many other things. It's just teaching me, about myself in those regards. Teaching me where I actually sit with something. What do I know? What I not know, and it becomes a lot clearer. And just really being okay with exploring and not knowing, and then just figuring out as you go along. Because I think I may have described this to you before as well, whereas like when I'm saying something, I feel like I'm treading a path, and that path is forming itself as I go along. That's what that visual looks like. So it's the path starts to appear the more steps I take down it. So it's like basically you have no idea where you're going, because it hasn't existed before. And that line of thought. But the more you do
that, the more you go into that and do that week in, week out, the better you're going to get at forming those pathways and figuring stuff out as well. So those neural connectors, whatever it is, that they will get better at doing that, because the brain almost goes, here we are again, we're trying to figure something out, and this is what's going to happen. So more often than not, it becomes clearer. You gain clarity from doing that, and actually your knowledge improves, because you are starting with something that you might not know much about, or you've read, and then you're trying to verbalize it to someone like me who might not know much about it or knows a bit about it, or we're talking to our listeners, and that becomes more concrete, and you're doing that week in, week out. So the familiarity builds more connectors, right? So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's the idea of like, it improves your listening. So it's like,
that's huge.
I feel like that was something I was good at anyway. But what's key here is it happens often where, you'll say something, or our guest will say something. And if I hadn't listened, because I would have some things that I want to actually ask you about or talk to you about. I could just I could just kind of dismiss what they've just said and keep asking what I wanted to ask about. But really what ends up happening is I'm actually listening, and then you say things, and then my mind goes, oh crap, we could go here, here, and here. Then I have to make a decision on, do I continue down the path that I wanted to go on initially, or has this been captivating enough to what you just said? Is it captivating enough to actually travel down that path now as well? And so kind of being able to make that judgment call, but also so then really paying attention to know what direction you want to take something in. And I think that's been good, because it's just you force you listen. It's better to do that, because then you go, oh, hang on, wait a minute, there's a lot more interesting stuff here. And so that's cool. And then afterwards you can always bring it back around to what you actually were interested in as well, once you get a bit of clarification on the other thing. So it happens all the time, and which is cool. So the ability to listen, because you have to, otherwise
it's a skill. It really is, like listening, properly listening to someone, not just to answer or ask your own question like you said, but to actually listen to what someone's saying and remember it and retain it, to then create another question to bring the conversation somewhere else. It's a real skill to know how to listen well, and that's something that I've definitely got better at. I was always quite a good listener, but to actually listen to someone, not to answer or not to say something back that you're already thinking about, but to actually talk about what they're talking about is important, isn't it?
Yeah,
because we always have like already like preconceived questions that we want to ask, regardless of whether it's in the podcast or out in the real world. It's like, actually, if you actually listen to someone, then the conversation is going to go somewhere quite different. So rather than, you're not listening to answer, you're listening to, I don't know, just talk about what they're focused in on, I think. And that's a skill for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's the ability to get good at that. and express that. That's been helped, for sure, by the podcast.
Huge. Yeah, same.
And just to be able to, consolidate what I already know, the ability to communicate what I already know. It's been big for that.
Yeah.
It's been definitely huge for that. And then also kind of give myself a bit of a talking to as well. Sometimes it's like, I don't mean that in a negative way where I'm telling myself off, like when you hear like, give yourself a talking to, it's like, no, it's when I'm exploring these ideas, is just reminding me of the value that they hold to me. And that's important, because you have to talk to yourself in that way a little bit as well, because otherwise you just forget what's actually genuinely important to you. And a good example of that is just when you could talked about it last week before, is the week before, where you were talking about, you wake up, you roll over, and the first thing you do is look at your phone in the morning, right? And like that can happen, and then you're in somebody else's headspace because you got all these messages or profiles that you're looking at, and you're scrolling, and you will end up you're not checking with yourself, you're in somebody else's zone, right? Or rather, those other people are influencing the zone that you could be in. And so you're already kind of like starting off your day a bit scattered. And so what instead needs to happen is kind of like wake up in the morning and have something that reminds you that you don't want to do that, because it's not a productive way to start your day. It's more productive for you to actually get out of bed, make a cup of coffee, just get yourself in the right headspace to take on your day.
Thoughts. Yeah.
Gather your thoughts. So there's a reminder that needs to be set there. So we have to be able to do that. And like, podcasts have been good for me like that as well, is where the things that I teach other people, I'm also reiterating it to myself, and that conversation that we're having here and the things that we explore is teaching me about, is teaching me to, sorry, that's the wrong word to use. The conversation that we end up having here is essentially showing me what I'm trying to embody. Is that you said it? It is basically what I'm trying to embody, and like just reminding myself of why this stuff is important. And you need that. You 100% need that. Is like being able to remind yourself of why you do the things that you do. Remind yourself of what's important to you. Remind yourself of your values. Remind yourself of why you wake up in the mornings, why you act. And it's been important. It's been hugely relevant to that kind of thing. So it's always a case of, you start something and you just don't know what you're going to get out of it. You never know the full truth of the full spectrum of what you're going to get out of it. So it was just a case of, we just decided to start a conversation and just see what happened. And then over time it gets into something where you realize, okay, this is kind of what I want it to be. Go with that, but then not worry about it filling that desire. It's kind of let it go where it may as well. It's like, okay, here's a plan for it, but also I'm going to be open to
and that's what I really like.
What comes out of it.
That's what I really like, is that we vaguely have a couple of things that we might discuss, but actually the conversation always morphs and flows somewhere else, and that's the beauty of it as well. And it always amazes me that I have enough in my brain to actually, do you know what I mean? Though it's like, what are we going to talk about? And it's like, I've actually got enough in my brain, and I've got all this knowledge that actually everything that I embody in my life is this is the stuff that we talk about. But at the same time, it brings back home everything that I need to do in my day, in my week, to live my best life and fulfill my potential. So it's almost like this is a really nice way of summarizing everything each week that we need to do, not just tell our clients, but that we need to do to live our best lives as well. Not even just setting an example, although I always feel like I set an example for my child and I guess for my clients, friends, whatever, but just for us really, to live our best life. And something that the podcast does for me is and I think you hit on it before, is that it really helps my communication, but also it helps me to verbalize and summarize important things that I need to get across fairly quickly, I want to say slowly, but I don't know if I mean that, but within my classes or my teaching, like I teach, I think I've said before, I teach quite big Zoom classes, and to be able to communicate over a digital format movement and why we're doing this movement, and to say it quickly but succinctly enough so that you're not just constantly talking, is so important. So in that respect, my communication has definitely been upped by doing this, and learning how to summarize something well and concisely enough that people can understand it across that medium, that format, is really important. So, you know, you're reaching 150, 200 people, and you have to be able to describe stuff really, really accurately and really well, so that they, in their living room, from your computer to theirs, they can understand what you're talking about, because often it gets lost within the visual. So your explanation has to be you can't tactile cue either. So your explanation has to be fairly on point. So to be able to verbalize and communicate in that way is super important for me. So I think just communicating well within the podcast helps me communicate well within my work and my life as well.
Yeah, fully. There's, the communication aspect of it. There was something that you said, it just reminded me, and it just kind of left me as well at the same time. It's like, oh yeah, that was good, and then getting the communication on point. It will come back. It will come back. But there's, oh man, felt like it was a good one. The birdie's flown away with my idea again.
I couldn't tell you what I said either, to be honest with you. Isn't that weird how that happens as well? It's like you start saying something and my brain does it, and then if you were like, what did you just say? I'd be like, I have no idea. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like you formulate it and you say it, and you know that you're going to say it, but then after it's been said, I'm like, I don't really know what I just said.
Yeah. Is actually, well, one of the things was how much you actually have in your brain, and and what that made me think of was that communication, getting it on point, is so valuable, because then you know whether you actually understand something or not, right? And also, you have this thing in your brain, but how many times do we have something that we have in our mind, but when you actually start saying the thing, we don't realize how much we either don't know about it or we don't know how we actually feel about it. So again, you have a thought, and you have what you think might be a belief, and you start to actually talk about it. And you go and you just say to yourself, hey, well, no, hang on a second, well, like, no, I don't know if that's true, you know, and so that's really, really important as well, especially nowadays in the day and age of like just infinite amounts of information available at our fingertips, and the amount of shit that people are talking in every domain, and you can see something and then it just enters your mind, and then you read and it just sits there, you know, it doesn't necessarily get challenged. Or you don't actually process it is a better word for it. You don't necessarily have to challenge it, you're just not processing it. So then when it comes to actually talking about that thing that you might have seen, you might realize actually there's a bunch of stuff here that I either don't understand, or once you process that bit of information, you just go on, no, this actually doesn't make any sense. And that's important to do. It's really, really important to do, is like to be able to have conversations so you actually know whether something is true or not, you know, whether you believe that thing or not, because you can let that idea sit with you. And even in cases where you can be like, I'm completely enamored by this idea, this sounds like it's a great idea, but then somebody just says something, because in conversation you started talking about it, and they go, yeah, but what about this? And you go, oh fuck, I didn't even think of this thing, you know, I didn't even realize that this could be
and that's really cool.
This could be a thing. And like, what is cool to the extent that, okay, good, hopefully not believing in a false idea here, but then it's also like, oh man, it's like, wish I wasn't challenged, because it would have just been easier to just stay with this. But then
that's not how we grow, though, is it?
Well, you lose, you know, you're losing something. you're losing something, but it's also dangerous because you're sitting with an idea which you genuinely actually don't know where you stand with it. And so when it becomes a little bit challenged, but it's been sat in you for so long, you can feel, again, defensive about it.
Yeah.
And you feel defensive about it because you felt like you were wrong. And really all it had to do was you just trying to process it at a higher level, and then you would have realized it for yourself. So this is all that conversation really does, is just help you understand the things that you actually hold in your brain. And so is it writing and talking are basically the two ways of doing it. But talking, I think, is a lot better because you got somebody else there. You're writing your own ideas out, and that's important because you want to be able to flesh out what you're thinking and how you're thinking about that thing, and then clarify it for yourself.
Yes.
But then the other thing you want to do is, and talk about it with another live human being who has a different perspective and can ask you and can just not necessarily challenge you on it, but just by being there can make you better at how you communicate a thing. Because by writing it out, you're writing it to yourself in a way, it's like you don't have to tell anybody else about it. So you write it and it doesn't even have to make any sense to anybody else who's trying to read it, but you feel like it makes sense to you. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you know the thing that you know the thing that you think you know. So by talking it out, you actually have to communicate in a way where it makes sense to somebody else, and that helps to pick apart whether the thing that you hold as a thought or as a value or as a belief is actually worth having for yourself. And it's kind of it's a bit of a litmus test in a way as well, because what I'm thinking is I could hold complete confidence in a thought, but the moment I say to myself, okay, I need to talk about it with Jude, or I need to talk about it with my bro, I need to talk about it with somebody else, and then I'm not confident in what I have to say, that tells you something, right? It can
Maybe it could almost tell you something about yourself and where you're at with how you're feeling and your confidence. I think
yeah, completely. There's like
not
it's
necessarily
twofold.
the subject, but
Yeah.
how you feel at that particular moment in time. I mean, you've seen me week to week, right? And some weeks I'm better than others for numerous reasons. And
Happens both ways.
and I think it depends where you are in that moment in time, like how you feel and how confident you feel at that time, and it will change week to week. So I think that's important to consider as well, because you get me on a bad week and we talk about a certain subject, and I'll be like, oh, I don't know anything, but on another week it's like, okay, let's explore this and get curious, and so I definitely think it's about mindset and your headspace as well within anything that you're talking about.
So there's a couple of things there which you said which I think are interesting. Number one is, it's just it can be about your own confidence level in the thing. Is like you're just not confident in in the way that you express yourself. So that's fine. But then also it can also be you don't actually have any confidence in the idea itself. So that's the other thing as well. So it's like separating out which it is. It's important to feel like you can say those things and express those things especially when you're not feeling confident about it, because that's how you develop the confidence for it, right? But then it's also, if you are trying to explain it and you feel like you're trying to get the words out, and then you finally get it to a point where you've articulated it well enough, and then you still realize, I don't have any confidence in this right now. It's like, okay, well, maybe the idea itself wasn't great in the first place. So you have to be able to do that to understand whether something is useful to you or not. Then, does that make sense as well? Did I say that in a way that made sense? It's like having your own confidence, or speaking so that you build your own confidence, but then you get to a point where you're articulating it and you start to articulate and you realize you still don't have confidence in the thing. So that's two different things. Cool. Okay, that good. That makes sense. And then God damn it, it always happens as well. It's like trying to hold two thoughts at the same time. Is like I'm trying. There's going to
Really
be something
hard.
there. There's going to be something there. What did you like? All right, I'm going to have to challenge you. It's like you said it.
Oh no, what did I say?
Oh, good weeks and bad weeks. That was it.
Yes.
So this is really. I think this is actually very is necessary topic because how do we minimize those good weeks and bad weeks, right? Is a question, and is a very worthy question to ask, because if we're trying to get good at anything, if we're trying to pursue a goal, then it's about consistency, right? It's like building that level of consistency up. So whether it's like, quote unquote performing on a podcast, is like putting in the language that you're familiar with from like music days as well. It's like it was always a
Yes.
performance. So you came to the event, it was always a performance.
Yeah.
And then and on some level this is a performance as well.
It
It's not like
is.
let's not make any bones about it. It is a bit of a performance, but however, it's yeah. So how do you bring that level to the game, which is like gives you the best chance to be at your best for it, and that requires putting some habits and some rituals in place, which will get you to that place where you're like, okay, I'm at that level, right? And that's key, because there's many things that people just fly by the seat of their pants often as well, and it's something that I used to do. But then one of the things that I realized, not one of the things, it's many things that I realized, like personally, that works for me to bring like to try and bring the best version of myself to the conversation, is like just getting in the right headspace with good quality music, probably having done some sort of exercise beforehand as well, or at least some sort of movement, and just putting myself in a good frame of mind by just mainly those two things, is like having done some sort of exercise and having listened to some good music. And that's why we've got the Evolve, Achieve, Thrive playlist, because we're like, yeah, cool, this is some good good music. Well, at least we know it's music that helps us like vibe at a higher level, so a higher frequency. So it's just putting these practices in place, which on some level going to move the dial in your favor towards showing up at your best. And then noticing what happens on the days where you do feel like you show up at your best, and on the days where you don't, and then kind of picking that apart. I mean, I say it to you as well, as like some days I feel like I'm holding myself back a little bit, and I don't necessarily. It's interesting, is I don't necessarily know why or how that comes about. Sometimes, like there is certain points. It's like sometimes I just feel like basically I don't know whether I should go down this route or not. I just make a choice, and then it feels like I'm holding. Yeah, you just question it, and I just feel like I'm holding myself back. So that's one thing. So it's like the question of I don't know. There's a part of my brain that just goes, I'm not sure if you should go down this route, and then I don't. But then it makes me think, okay, well, the route I have gone down, should I have gone down that route, or should I have picked that one? There's because there's one, like I'm avoiding, even though I would have liked to go down that road, and I've picked a road which is actually, I realize, is second best option for me. So I should have gone down the first option. So
it's trusting your intuition as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Exactly. It's like trusting, kind of going with the gut and like letting it happen. And so then it just ends up feeling like I'm holding myself back, and then I've described like this kind of image of, if I feel like I'm really on it, it just it's like this well of information, and I'm just like dipping into the well and just like pulling words out of it and pulling ideas out of it, and it just feels like it comes naturally. But sometimes it just feels like there's a lid on that well, and I'm trying to open it, and I'm like, oh damn, I can't get in there, and I'm stuck, and I'm confused, and oh crap, I don't know where I'm going now. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating to be able to pay attention to those aspects of your mind. Yeah. So with you, what does it feel like when you, like the days you feel like you're showing up, and the days you feel like you're not? Like what? Because you're a bit visual as well. I wonder if you have a visual for it, or if there's something else.
I don't really have a visual for it, but I know for me, especially, it's just thinking about things during the week. No, again, it comes down to preparation for me. It's not that I have to know word for word what I'm going to say or anything like that, but I like to have thought about things during my week. But then it's also, again, it comes back to, for me, my energy levels and making sure that I've had enough sleep and that I don't feel too burnt out. Because if I feel any of those things, then my conversation, my brain's just not going to function well. So I've got to make sure that I've eaten well and that I'm hydrated and that I've had as good a night's sleep as I can possibly get. But it's interesting, like I think I've done about 14 podcasts with you now. So what I've done 14 weeks, and that's quite a lot, right?
Yeah, that's right. Jeez. I was just thinking about it. I think it was number 41, episode 41.
So when I started, there you go. And I feel like the nerves have slowly started to calm, because at first it was like, and now it's like, it's like when I started doing those really big Zoom classes for Golster as well. At first it was terrifying, and it was, I started the podcast at probably around exactly the same time. And both now it's like, yes, I still get nervous, but the nerves have lessened and I've got more control over it all. And I feel like I can bring better conversation, better teaching to the podcast, to the classes. And for me, sometimes, I love the way you describe it about how sometimes you don't know where the conversation's going and it's like a path just opening up. And sometimes I have no idea what I'm about to say. I don't have visual. All I have is visual most of the time, but often it's just almost like words just get placed. It sounds really weird, but words just get placed in my mouth, and it's just like my brain it's just like this like weird traveling experience. It's just like stuff opens out and I just say how the thoughts appear. I don't know. I don't have a visual for it at all. It's just sometimes, and I have no idea that those words are in my head or that I could put them together like that, but it just sometimes it does come out and it's like, oh yeah, that's quite useful. That's quite a good way of putting stuff. And so, and that's why I find, and I don't think the listeners know that I do this, but I transcribe the podcast afterwards. I find it really useful to do that, because it's like, oh yeah, G said that, and then I said that, and that was really useful, and that I'm going to use in my week, and I feel like listening to it over actually really helps me to retain that information a little bit more, and then now I bring that into my teaching and my life as well. So that's quite useful.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I love it. Like, you love that you're going back to it and be like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. And like me, I just have a bit of an aversion to listening back sometimes, because I'm
really,
because I'm like, what the fuck am I even saying?
But it's useful, because at first I was like, oh my god, my voice, oh my god, oh. But now I'm like, and I was saying this to my friend earlier. I was like, sometimes you'll start saying stuff, and when you're doing it live, you're like, in your head, you're like, what the hell am I talking about? But then you listen back to it and it's like, oh, that did make sense, that's okay. So it's so weird doing live compared to after. It's quite a useful thing to see. So
no, you're right. I'll do it. I should probably do it more often as well, as like to listen back to the whole thing, because it's funny. It's a funny one, because it's a little bit of imposter syndrome as well, right? It's just, you say something and you're just like, oh, I actually said something that was useful. Because and like other people like resonated with it. Oh right, okay, great. Because it's just a funny one where you know things, but this becomes so normalized to you. I remember talking about this with you when you were the standard that you achieved with playing music, and I was like, this is amazing. You're like, what, really? Because you were just surrounded by people who were on that level as well. So it was like, and it was just normal, and no one was ever praising you for the quality that you brought, because it was just so much about just getting things on point. And it was expected. Right. And so you're like, oh, okay, right, maybe I do know something that's some people aren't very good at, and take years and years and years of hours and hours and hours worth of practice to get good at. And oh right, okay, I've got something useful here. And it's the same thing. It's like, I just never realized how useful the things that I have stored in this brain of mine can be to people. And it's like, the amount of times this happened where, like, clients are paying their fees for the program, but like I'll say one thing or I help them understand just one little tiny thing, and they're like, wow, okay, that was really helpful. That was, it's just basically it's worth the whole fee of the program itself. And you're like, oh shit, okay, right. And it's just something that just kind of sits in the back of your mind, and you just kind of forget about it until it comes up, and then it comes up and you just go, oh wow, that was incredibly useful to somebody, and I had no idea how useful that could be. So
there you go.
So yeah, so it's just so that's it's part of the reason why it doesn't feel like I don't necessarily feel like listening back. I feel like whatever, it's just me, and I've got other podcasts I'd rather listen to because those people are a lot smarter than I am. It's like,
no. Come on.
yeah, exactly. Just like build myself up. Like, be like, oh, no, there's something here. There's something here that can be useful.
Something. Yes.
Yeah. We'll see. Well, we're going to know some more things as time goes on, because otherwise, there's no way. There's no way that I'm not. You just got to keep learning, right? And there's nothing more exciting than doing that. In a lot of ways, for me, is just learning is enriching. And so
it's a great way of saying it.
It just adds a lot of.
I was going to say, like, compare these podcasts to this time next year and how different it's going to be, and that's exciting as well. Not to look into the future too much, but it's going to be a whole different conversation,
Yeah.
So
just evolved. Yeah. Evolve that conversation, achieve new levels, and thrive.
Off the conversation. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. All right, wicked. I think maybe that's a good place to leave it today.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, wicked. All right, that was good. Thank you for everybody tuning in. It's like, tell us what you think of the conversation. What did you get out of it? Clearly you can tell, like, we're saying some stuff and we're figuring stuff out as we go along. It's like, what has this podcast helped you figure out? And follow us on Instagram at Evolve, Achieve, Thrive, and send us your thoughts. If you feel like sharing the episode with friends and family, please do. It helps us get the voice out there and get the conversation out there so people can learn off of it. And subscribe to the show on YouTube or on your favorite podcast player, whether that's Apple Podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether it's Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe there, because that's where we are. We're everywhere. And thanks for tuning in again. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.